The stars were dying one by one, not from old age or cosmic forces, but from something far worse. The HFY had come from the dark spaces between galaxies, and they brought death with them. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of his ship, the UES Defiant. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. At 42 years old, he had seen many battles, but nothing like this. The holographic display in front of him showed a map of human space. Red dots marked the worlds that were gone. "Too many red dots now, Captain. We just lost contact with New Geneva," said Lieutenant Amy Carter. She was young, maybe 25, with short blonde hair and a voice that shook when she spoke. The colony had 3 million people. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. 3 million more dead. The number was too big to understand, but he felt each loss like a weight on his chest. New Geneva had been a farming world, peaceful and green. Now it was nothing but empty space and floating debris. "Any survivors?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, sir. The HFY don't leave survivors." The aliens had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of human territory. Their ships were massive, each one the size of a small moon. Moved slowly but with purpose, consuming everything in their path. Planets, space stations, entire solar systems vanished when they passed through. Commander Lisa Brooks walked up to Jake's side. She was his second in command, a smart woman with dark hair and steady hands. They had served together for 8 years, and she could read his moods better than anyone. "The fleet is pulling back," she said quietly. "Admiral Price wants all ships to retreat to the inner colonies." Jake nodded but did not speak. He understood the order. Humanity needed time to figure out how to fight these things. Every ship that stayed and fought was another ship lost. But it felt wrong to run while people were dying. The bridge of the Defiant was busy with activity. Crew members worked at their stations, monitoring communications and tracking the enemy's movement. The ship itself was not new, but it was well maintained. Jake had commanded her for 5 years, and she had never let him down. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Arcturus colony," said Amy. "They're requesting immediate evacuation support." Jake looked at the star map again. Arcturus was 2 days. Away at maximum speed? The HFY would reach it in less than 1 day. There was no way to save those people, but they would try anyway, because that was what humans did. "Set course for Arcturus," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed. Captain, the evacuation ships won't reach them in time," said Lieutenant Commander Ryan. Hayes from the weapons station. He was a young officer, eager and brave, but he had not yet learned that sometimes bravery was not enough. "I know," Jake replied, "but we have to try." The Defiant jumped into hyperspace, racing toward a world they could not save. Jake had made this same desperate run dozens of times in the past months. Sometimes they saved a few hundred people. Sometimes they saved a few thousand. It was never enough. While they traveled, Dr. Karen White brought Jake the latest intelligence reports about the enemy. She was the ship's science officer, a brilliant woman who had been studying the HFY since they first appeared. "We're learning more about their ships," she said, spreading data files across the main table. "They're not built like our vessels. They're grown like living creatures. The hulls appear to be some kind of biological metal that can repair itself." Jake studied the images of enemy ships. They looked like nightmares made real, with curved surfaces that pulsed like beating hearts. Some were shaped like giant spiders. Others resembled jellyfish floating through space. All of them were covered in weapons that could destroy human ships with single shots. "How do we fight something like that?" he asked. "I don't know yet, Karen." Admitted, our weapons damage them, but they heal too quickly. And every world they consume makes them stronger. The ships literally grow larger after each conquest. That was the most frightening part. The HFY were not just destroying human colonies. They were feeding on them. Humanity was fighting an enemy that became stronger with every victory. The Defiant dropped out of hyperspace near Arcturus to find chaos. The HFY had already arrived. Their massive ships hung in space around the planet like predators surrounding wounded prey. Smaller vessels, each still larger than human battleships, were descending toward the surface. My God, whispered Amy. As she stared at the tactical display, there are so many of them. Jake counted 12 major ships and dozens of smaller ones. The Defiant was alone against this fleet. One human ship against an armada of monsters. Are there any other human ships in the system? He asked. Negative, sir. We're on our own. The planet below was already dying. Jake could see the lights of cities going dark one by one as the aliens attacked. Millions of people were down there, and there was nothing he could do to save them. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the surface, Amy reported. It's Governor Patricia Mills. Jake had met Mills once at a colonial conference. She was a good leader who cared about her people. Now her voice came through the speakers, broken by static and explosions in the background. This is Arcturus colony to any human ships. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under heavy attack. The enemy is landing troops in all major cities. We need immediate assistance. Jake wanted to answer, to tell her that help was coming, but it would be a lie. The Defiant could not fight this many enemy ships and survive. But he could not leave without trying something. Amy, open a channel to the Kethver fleet, he ordered. His crew looked at him in surprise. The aliens had never responded to human attempts at communication. They simply attacked and consumed without any attempt at negotiation. Sir, they don't talk to us, Amy said. Try anyway. All frequencies. The message went out into space, but there was no response. The Kethver continued. Their assault on the planet below? Jake watched the tactical display as more cities went dark. Each light that disappeared represented thousands of dead. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting more Kethver ships approaching, reported Ryan. A lot more. This looks like their main fleet. Jake felt his heart sink. If this was their main force, then Earth itself was in danger. The human homeworld was only 3 jumps away from here. Once Arcturus fell, nothing would stop the aliens from reaching the heart of human civilization. Lisa, give me a secure channel. To Fleet Command, he said to his executive officer. The connection took several minutes to establish. When Admiral Helen Price appeared on the screen, she looked as tired as Jake felt. The woman who commanded all human naval forces had aged years in the past months. Jake, what's your status? She asked. Arcturus is lost, Admiral. The Kethver main fleet is here. Dozens of ships, maybe more still coming. After they finish here, Earth is next. Price nodded grimly. All remaining ships are falling back to establish a defensive line near Jupiter. You need to get out of there now. Jake looked at the tactical display again. The planet was still fighting, but it would not last much longer. Understood. We're leaving now. But as he gave the order to retreat, Jake felt something break inside him. They were running again. Always running. How many more worlds would die while humanity ran and hid? The Defiant jumped back into hyperspace, racing toward Earth and what might be humanity's final battle. Behind them, Arcturus burned, another red dot on the map of human shame. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. 3 days of watching the communication channels fill with distress calls from dying worlds. 3 days of hearing the screams of colonies being consumed by the Kethver advance. Jake Morrison barely slept during the trip. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the lights of Arcturus going dark one by one. The Defiant was not alone in its retreat. Other human ships appeared on the sensors as they approached the Sol system. Some were military vessels like his own. Others were civilian transports packed with refugees who had escaped the outer colonies. All of them were running from the same nightmare. When they finally reached the defensive line near Jupiter, Jake was amazed by what he saw. Hundreds of human ships floated in space, forming a massive fleet. There were battleships and cruisers, destroyers and fighters. Space stations had been moved into position, their hulls bristling with weapons. It was the largest gathering of human military power in history, but Jake knew it would not be enough. He had seen what the Kethver could do. This fleet was impressive by human standards. The aliens had ships that could swallow entire battle groups. Admiral Helen Price called a meeting of all ship captains. Jake found himself in a room with 200 other officers, all of them looking as tired and worried as he felt. Price stood at the front of the room, her silver hair pulled back and her face showing the strain of command. "Gentlemen and ladies," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "You all know why we are here. Kethver have consumed 47 human worlds in 6 months. Our outer colonies are gone. Our frontier fleets are destroyed. This is humanity's last line of defense." She activated a holographic display that showed the enemy's advance. Red markers swept across the map like a plague, each one representing a dead world. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The aliens were moving directly toward Earth. "Our science teams have been studying the enemy," Price continued. "Dr. White, please share what you have learned." Karen White stepped forward, carrying a data pad filled with research. She looked exhausted but determined. Jake knew she had been working without rest to understand their enemy. "The Kethver ships are unlike anything we have ever encountered," she said. "They are not built in the traditional sense. They're grown like living organisms. The whole material appears to be a form of biological metal that can repair itself and adapt to damage." She showed images of enemy ships that had been captured by long-range sensors. The vessels looked organic, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with life. Some were shaped like massive sea creatures. Others resembled giant insects or plants. "Each ship contains what we believe to be a collective consciousness," Karen explained. "They share information instantly across their entire fleet. When one ship learns something, they all learn it. This makes them incredibly difficult to surprise or outmaneuver." A captain from the battleship Oregon raised his hand. "How do we fight something like that?" "Our weapons seem to have little effect." "We have discovered some weaknesses," Karen replied. "The biological components of their ships are vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies. If we can hit them with the right energy patterns, we can disrupt their systems. The problem is that the window of opportunity is very small, and they adapt quickly." Admiral Price took control of the briefing again. "We have one advantage the Kethver do not. They have been fighting scattered colonial forces in single ships. They have never faced a coordinated fleet action. We will use that surprise to our advantage." She outlined the battle plan. The human fleet would form 3 lines of defense. The first line would consist of fast attack ships and fighters. Their job was to harass the enemy and gather intelligence. The second line would be the main battle fleet, with all the heavy weapons. The third line would be the last resort, ships positioned to protect Earth itself if everything else failed. Jake listened to the plan and tried to feel hopeful, but he had seen too much to believe in easy victories. The Kethver had destroyed every human force they had encountered. Why would this time be different? After the briefing, Jake returned to the Defiant to prepare his crew. The ship had been assigned to the second line of defense, part of the main battle fleet. It was an honor that felt more like a death sentence. He gathered his senior officers in the conference room. Lisa Brooks, his executive officer, looked calm, but tense. Amy Carter, the communications officer, was checking and rechecking her equipment. Ryan Hayes, the weapons officer, was studying targeting solutions. Karen White was still analyzing the enemy data. "Y'all heard the Admiral," Jake said. "We get one shot at this. The Kethver will not give us a second chance." "What are our odds, Captain?" asked Ryan. Jake considered lying, telling them they had a good chance of victory. But these people deserved the truth. Honestly, not good. We are outnumbered and outgunned. But we are fighting for our home. It has to count for something. Lisa leaned forward. "The crew is ready, Jake. They know what is at stake. Everyone from the engine room to the bridge understands that this is it. Win or lose, this is where we make our stand." Over the next 2 days, the human fleet prepared for battle. Ships were resupplied with ammunition and fuel. Weapons were calibrated and tested. Emergency repairs were made to damaged vessels. Everyone worked with the desperate energy of people who knew they might not live to see another day. Jake spent time visiting different sections of his ship, talking to the crew members who would fight and die under his command. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Paul Davis was making final adjustments to the power systems. The man was in his 50s, with grease-stained hands and a steady disposition. "How are we looking, Chief?" Jake asked. "She'll hold together, Captain." Davis replied, "The Defiant has never let us down before. She'll not start now." In the fighter bay, pilots were checking their small craft. These men and women would fly into battle in ships barely larger than old Earth automobiles, facing enemy vessels the size of cities. Their courage was humbling. Lieutenant Susan Parker was one of the squadron leaders. She was young and fearless, the kind of pilot who could thread a fighter through an asteroid field at full speed. "We are ready to launch, sir. The fighters may be small, but we are fast. We will give the big ships hell." Jake visited the medical bay, where Dr. Robert Chen was preparing for casualties. The doctor was a quiet man who had served on the Defiant. For 3 years, he never said much, but his skill had saved many lives. "How many beds do you have ready?" Jake asked. 50, Chen replied. "But I fear it will not be enough." The hardest visit was to the junior officers' quarters, where Ensign Peter Clark was writing a letter to his family on Earth. The young man was barely 20 years old, fresh out of the academy. This would be his first real battle. "Having second thoughts?" Jake asked gently. Peter looked up with determination in his eyes. "No, sir. My sister lives on Earth. My parents are there too. If we do not stop the Kethver here, they will all die. I would rather die fighting than live knowing I ran away." That evening, Jake stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the human fleet. The ships floated in formation, their lights creating a constellation against the darkness of space. It was beautiful and tragic at the same time. Be the last free human vessels in the galaxy. Amy Carter joined him at the window. "Captain, long-range sensors are detecting movement at the edge of the system. The Kethvar are coming?" Jake nodded. He had known this moment would arrive, but he still felt a chill run down his spine. "How long until they reach us?" 6 hours, sir. 6 hours until the battle that would decide humanity's fate. 6 hours to live or die as free people." Ake looked out at the stars one more time, then turned to face his destiny. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "The enemy is approaching. Battle stations. This is what we have trained for. This is what we are here to do. Make me proud." The Defiant came alive with activity as the crew prepared for war. In 6 hours, they would learn if humanity deserved to survive among the stars. The Kethver fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system like a nightmare made real. Jake Morrison watched the tactical display on the bridge of the Defiant as hundreds of enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace. Each vessel was massive, dwarfing even the largest human battleships. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of a single controlling intelligence. "My God," whispered Amy Carter at her communication station. "There are so many of them." Jake counted the enemy ships. On the display, 200 confirmed contacts, with more appearing every minute. The largest vessels were over 10 kilometers long, shaped like enormous jellyfish with translucent hulls that pulsed with alien light. Smaller ships, still larger than human cruisers, swarmed around them like insects protecting a hive. "All ships, this is Admiral Price," came the voice over the fleet channel. "Enemy contact confirmed. All units prepare for battle. Remember what we are fighting for." The human fleet spread out in its defensive formation. 300 ships arranged in careful lines, their weapons charged and ready. It was the most powerful force humanity had ever assembled, but looking at the approaching enemy, Jake knew it would not be enough. Commander Lisa Brooks stood beside his captain's chair, her face pale but determined. "The first wave attack ships are moving into position," she reported. "Fighters are launching from all carriers." Through the main view screen, Jake could see the small human fighters streaming out from their mother ships. They looked like tiny sparks of light against the darkness of space, brave pilots flying toward certain death. Lieutenant Susan Parker's voice came over the communication channel, calm and professional, despite the odds. "This is Falcon Leader to all fighters. Stay in formation. Hit 'em fast and get out. Do not try to be heroes." The first contact came. When the human fighters reached the edge of the Kethver formation, the alien ships responded with weapons that defied understanding. Beams of purple energy lanced out from organic weapon pods, each shot powerful enough to vaporize a fighter instantly. but the human pilots were skilled and desperate. They wove between the enemy fire, their small ships dancing through space like leaves in a storm. "Direct hit on enemy vessel," reported Ryan Hayes from the weapons station. "Minimal damage observed." Jake watched as the fighter attack struck the alien fleet. Missiles and energy blasts hit the massive ships, creating brief flashes of light against their hulls. But the damage was superficial. The organic metal that made up the Kethver ships began healing itself almost immediately, flowing like liquid to repair the wounds. "Falcon 3 is down," came Parker's voice, tight with emotion. "Falcon 7 is not responding." The first wave of fighters had barely scratched the enemy, and already human pilots were dying. Jake felt sick watching the small ships being picked off one by one. These were his people, brave men and women who had volunteered to face impossible odds. The Kethver fleet continued its advance, moving with the slow inevitability of a tidal wave. Their ships maintained perfect formation, each one knowing exactly where it belonged. As they drew closer, Jake could see more details of their construction. The hulls were not smooth metal, but living tissue that breathed and pulsed. Weapon ports looked like mouths full of teeth. It was technology that had been grown rather than built. "Second-wave fighters are engaging," reported Lisa. "Fast attack boats are beginning their run." The human fast attack boats were larger than fighters, but still tiny compared to the alien vessels. They carried more powerful weapons and better shields, but they were still gnats attacking elephants. Jake watched as they fired their missiles at the enemy fleet. Each warhead carrying enough destructive power to level a city, the missiles struck home, creating explosions that lit up space like miniature suns. For a moment, Jake allowed himself to hope that they were doing real damage. Then the light faded, and the alien ships continued forward, their hulls already healing from the attack. "Incoming transmission from the lead enemy vessel," Amy announced, her voice filled with surprise. "They are trying to communicate." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Kethver had never spoken to humans before. They simply attacked and consumed without any attempt at negotiation. What had changed? "Put it on screen," he ordered. The main view screen flickered and changed to show something that made several crew members gasp in horror. The image was of a face, but not like any face Jake had ever seen. It was a writhing mass of flesh and metal, with too many eyes and a mouth that moved in ways that hurt to watch. When it spoke, the voice was like grinding metal, mixed with organic whispers. "Small creatures," the thing said, its words causing the speakers to crackle with static. "Amuse the collective with your struggles. But your resistance is meaningless. We have consumed civilizations that spanned entire galaxies. You will join them in feeding our growth." Admiral Price responded for the human fleet. "This is Admiral Helen Price of the Earth Defense Force. We demand that you withdraw from human space immediately. We will defend our worlds with everything." We have the alien face seemed to consider this for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something like laughter in its voice. "Your species shows interesting aggression. This trait will serve the collective well when you are absorbed. Your struggle only makes you more valuable to us." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Defiant in stunned silence. Jake realized that to the Kethver, this battle was not about conquest. It was about harvesting. They wanted humanity. To fight because resistance made humans more useful to their collective consciousness. "All ships, this is Price," came the Admiral's voice over the fleet channel. "The enemy wants us to fight, so let us give them a fight they will never forget. Main fleet, prepare to engage." The massive human battleships moved forward, their enormous guns turning toward the enemy. These were the most powerful weapons humanity had ever built: energy cannons that could crack open asteroids and missile launchers that could level continents. Surely they would have more effect than the smaller attack craft, the Thunder Bay, battleship that had served for 20 years, fired first. Its main guns erupted in streams of pure energy that crossed the void in seconds. The beams struck one of the smaller Kethver ships directly, creating an explosion that lit up half the battlefield. When the light faded, the alien ship was still there, damaged but not destroyed, its hull already beginning to heal. Bay had scored a direct hit with weapons that could destroy any human vessel, and the enemy ship was merely wounded. "All ships, concentrate fire on single targets," ordered Admiral Price. "We need to overwhelm their healing ability." The entire human fleet opened fire at once. Hundreds of energy beams and thousands of missiles streaked toward the Kethver formation. The space between the two fleets became a storm of light and destruction as human weapons found their targets. Several smaller alien ships took critical damage. Their organic hulls ruptured and bleeding strange fluids into space. But for every ship that was damaged, 10 more continued forward unharmed. And even the damaged vessels were healing, their living metal flowing to seal the wounds. The Kethver response was devastating. Their weapons were unlike anything in human experience. Purple beams that seemed to eat through ship hulls like acid. Living projectiles that burrowed into human vessels and exploded from within. Energy fields that simply made ships disappear as if they had never existed. The cruiser Pacific Storm was the first major human vessel to die. A Kethver weapon wrapped around it like a giant tentacle, crushing the ship's hull like an eggshell. The destroyer Ranger vanished in a flash of purple light, leaving only empty space where it had been. The battleship Oregon broke apart when living projectiles found its ammunition storage. "We have lost 30 ships in the first exchange," reported Lisa, her voice steady despite the carnage around them. "The enemy has lost maybe 3. Jake watched the tactical display as more human ships disappeared. The fleet that had taken months to assemble was being destroyed in minutes, but still they fought, pouring fire into the enemy formation with desperate courage. "Captain, we are receiving new orders," Amy announced. "All remaining ships are ordered to retreat to the 3rd defensive line." Jake looked at the display one. More time. Half the human fleet was already gone, and the enemy had barely been scratched. The retreat order made sense, but it felt like surrender. They were running again, abandoning another battle to the aliens. "Helm, set course for the fallback position," he ordered reluctantly. "Maximum speed." As the Defiant fled with the remnants of the human fleet, Jake wondered how many more retreats they could make before there was nowhere left to run. The retreat was a nightmare of burning ships and desperate calls for help. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Defiant as the remnants of humanity's greatest fleet fled toward the inner solar system. Behind them, the Kethver continued. Their advance, moving through the wreckage of human vessels like they were nothing more than space debris. "Captain, we are receiving evacuation orders from Admiral Price," reported Amy Carter. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. "All remaining ships are to fall back to Earth immediately." Jake stared at the tactical display. The human fleet had been cut in half during the first engagement. 50 ships destroyed in less than an hour, with thousands of crew members dead or missing. The survivors were scattered and demoralized, running from an enemy they could not hope to defeat. "Sir, the Kethver are not pursuing at full speed," observed Ryan Hayes from his weapons station. "They seem to be taking their time." Lisa Brooks nodded grimly. "They know they have already won. Why hurry when there is nothing left that can stop them?" The realization hit Jake like a physical blow. The aliens were right. Humanity had thrown everything they had at the Kethver and barely scratched their fleet. Earth's defenses would be even weaker than what they had just faced. The human homeworld would fall within days, maybe hours. "Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Price," Amy announced. The Admiral appeared on the main screen, her face showing the strain of command and defeat. Behind her, Jake could see the bridge of her flagship, the crew working frantically to coordinate the retreat. "All ship commanders, this is Price. We are falling back to establish a final defensive line around Earth. I know this is hard, but we have no choice. The enemy is too strong." Jake listened to the orders, but something was wrong with them. They were the words of someone who had already given up. Price was going through the motions of command, but she knew as well as anyone that Earth could not be defended against this enemy. "Admiral," Jake said, opening a direct channel. "What about the colonies beyond Earth? Mars, Europa, Titan? Are we abandoning them too?" Price looked tired, older than her 55 years. "Jake, we do not have enough ships left to defend anything. We can barely protect Earth itself." The outer colonies will have to evacuate or—" She did not finish the sentence. They both knew what the alternative was. Millions of people would die while humanity made its last stand around the homeworld. Jake closed the channel and turned to face his crew. These people had followed him. Through every battle of the war, they trusted him to make the right decisions, to lead them through impossible situations. Now he had to decide whether to follow orders or follow his conscience. "Lisa, how many human ships are still in the fleet?" he asked his executive officer. 43 combat vessels, plus maybe 20 support ships, she replied. The HFY have over 100 ships still operational. The numbers were impossible. Even if every human ship fought perfectly, they would still be outnumbered 3-1 by an enemy with superior technology and weapons. It was not a battle anymore. It was an execution. "Captain, we should follow the fleet to Earth," suggested Ryan. "Every ship will be needed for the final defense." Jake nodded absently, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Arcturus, about New Geneva, about all the worlds that had died while humanity retreated. How many more would die before this was over? How many people would suffer while the human fleet ran from fight after fight? "Amy, open a channel to the entire crew," he ordered. The young communications officer looked surprised. "Sir, what should I tell them? That I want to speak to everyone? Engineering, medical, weapons, all departments?" Within minutes, Jake was addressing the 800 men and women who served aboard the Defiant. He could see them on monitors. Throughout the ship, gathered in their work areas and living quarters, their faces showed exhaustion, fear, and the hollow look of people who had seen too much death. "This is Captain Morrison," he began. "You all know what happened today. We lost the battle. We lost good ships and good people," the Admiral has ordered us to retreat to Earth for a final stand. He paused, looking at the faces on the screens. These people deserved honesty, not false hope or empty speeches. "I want you to know that following those orders means we will probably die defending Earth. The HFY are too strong. They will break through our defenses and consume our homeworld just like they consumed all the others." Murmurs ran through the crew. Some looked angry. Others looked resigned. A few looked relieved that someone was finally telling them the truth. "But I also want you to know that we have another choice," Jake continued. "We can stay here, can make our stand right now between the enemy and Earth. We cannot win, but we can slow them down. Can buy time for the evacuation ships too. Save more people." The bridge fell silent. Lisa Brooks stared at her captain with wide eyes. "Jake, that would be suicide." "One ship against their entire fleet?" "Yes," he replied simply. "It would be suicide. But it would also be the right thing to do." He turned back to address the crew. "I will not order anyone to stay. This is a volunteer mission. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to catch up with the fleet. No one will think less of you for making that choice." For several long minutes, no one spoke. Jake waited, giving his people time to think about what he was asking. He was asking them to die for strangers, for people they would never meet. He was asking them to sacrifice their lives for a cause that was already lost. Chief Engineer Paul Davis was the first to respond. His gruff voice came over the intercom from the engine room. "Captain, the engines are running fine. The Defiant is ready to fight." Dr. Robert Chin spoke next from the medical bay. "I have treated casualties from every battle of this war. I am tired of running while people die. If we are going to make a stand, let us make it here." One by one, department heads reported in. Weapons ready, communications ready, life support ready. The crew of the Defiant had made their choice. "Amy." Carter looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. "It's her. I have family on Earth. My parents, my little brother. If we stay here and fight, I might never see them again." 8. Jake felt his heart break for the young woman. She was barely 25. Years old, with her whole life ahead of her. "Amy, you can take a shuttle. No one would blame you." She shook her head firmly. "No, sir. If we do not try to stop them here, my family will die anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting." Lisa Brooks stepped forward and placed her hand on Jake's shoulder. You crazy old fool. You know this is insane, right? Completely insane, he agreed. Good. I was getting tired of being sensible all the time. Jake turned to Ryan Hayes. Ryan, can our weapons hurt them if we get close enough? The young weapons officer studied his displays. Maybe. Dr. White's research suggests that their hulls are weaker at close range. If we can get inside their defensive formation, we might be able to do some real damage. It was not much of a plan, but it was better than running away again. Jake opened a channel to the rest of the human fleet, which was already several hours away. Admiral Price, this is Captain Morrison of the Defiant. We are remaining in position to delay the enemy advance. Price's response came back immediately. Jake, get out of there. That is an order. You cannot fight their entire fleet alone. With respect, Admiral, I can try. Jake closed the channel and turned to face the approaching enemy. The Kethber fleet was still moving toward Earth, confident in their victory. They had no idea that one human ship was about to teach them what desperation could accomplish. All stations prepare for battle, he ordered. Let us show these aliens what humans do. When they have nothing left to lose, the Defiant turned to face the Kethver fleet alone. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching as over 100 alien ships approached his single vessel. The enemy formation looked like a swarm of sea monsters rising from the depths of space, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life. Captain, they are hailing us, reported Amy Carter, surprise clear in her voice. The main screen flickered to show the same horrifying face they had seen before. The mass of flesh and metal that spoke for the Kethvar collective seemed almost amused by what it was seeing. Small ship, the creature said, its voice like grinding metal. Your fleet has abandoned you. Why do you remain? Your sacrifice is meaningless. Jake stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Because this is what humans do. We stand our ground. You will die uselessly. Your ship will be consumed. Your crew will feed the collective. Maybe, Jake replied, but you will have to work for it. The alien face twisted into something that might have been a smile. Your aggression pleases us. When you are absorbed, you will make the collective stronger. Jake cut the transmission and turned to his crew. All hands, battle stations. Is it? The Defiant was a good ship, but she was just one vessel against an armada. Her weapons were designed to fight other human ships, not organic monsters from beyond the galaxy. Her shields could protect against conventional attacks, but the Kethver used weapons that defied understanding. Enemy ships are spreading out to surround us, reported Ryan Hayes from the weapons station. They are taking their time. They know. We cannot escape. Jake watched the tactical display as the alien ships moved into position. They were not treating this as a real battle. To them, the Defiant was just an annoyance to be swept aside. That attitude might be their only advantage. Lisa plot a course straight through their formation, he ordered. Maximum speed.
Executive.
Officer looked at him with concern. Jake, that will take us right into the middle of their fleet. We will be surrounded. That is the idea. Dr. White said their hulls are weaker at close range. If we are going to hurt them, we need to get close. The Defiant accelerated toward the enemy formation, her engines pushing the ship faster than she had ever flown before. The alien ship seemed surprised by the direct attack. They had expected the human vessel to try to run or hide. Instead, it was charging straight at them. Coming fire, called out Ryan. Multiple enemy ships are targeting us. Purple beams lanced out from the Kethver vessels, each one powerful enough to destroy a human ship. But the Defiant was small and fast, and her pilot was desperate. The ship twisted and rolled through space, dodging between the energy blasts like a fighter avoiding flak. Return fire, ordered Jake. Target their weapon pods. The Defiant's guns opened up, sending streams of energy into the nearest alien ship. The beams struck the organic hull and actually penetrated, creating wounds that bled strange fluids into space. For the first time in the war, human weapons were doing real damage to a Kethver vessel. Direct hit, reported Ryan with excitement. We knocked out 2 of their weapon clusters. But the victory was temporary. Even as they watched, the alien ship's hull began to heal itself, the living metal flowing to seal the wounds. Within minutes, the damage was gone, and the weapons were functional again. "They are adapting," observed Dr. Karen White from her science station. "Each time we hit them, their hulls become more resistant to our weapons." The Defiant plunged deeper into the enemy formation, her guns firing continuously. She was like a single bee attacking a swarm of hornets, too small to be easily caught, but too weak to do lasting damage. The alien ships turned to follow her, their massive bulk making them slow to change direction. "We are drawing them away from Earth," noted Lisa. "The fleet will have more time to prepare defenses." Jake nodded grimly. Every minute they bought was another minute for evacuation ships to save civilians. Even if the Defiant died here, her sacrifice would not be meaningless. A Kethver weapon finally found its mark. The ship shuddered as something wrapped around her hull like a giant tentacle. The metal began to squeeze, and Jake could hear the groaning of stressed metal throughout the ship. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Ensign Peter Clark from damage. Control, emergency bulkheads are holding, but barely. Engineering, can you give me more power to the shields?" Jake called out. Chief Davis's voice came back over the intercom despite the chaos around them. "Giving you everything we have, Captain, but it will not last long." The Defiant broke free of the alien weapon and continued her attack run. Her shields were failing and her hull was cracked, but she kept fighting. The crew worked with desperate efficiency, knowing that every second counted. "Captain, I am detecting something strange," said Karen from her station. "The enemy weapons are having an unexpected effect on our ship's systems." "What kind of effect?" Jake asked, dodging another enemy beam. "The electromagnetic fields from their weapons are interacting with our shield generators. It is creating some kind of resonance frequency." Jake did not understand the science, but he could see the results. The ship's systems were fluctuating wildly. Power levels rose and fell without explanation. The hull itself seemed to be changing, taking on a faint glow that matched the alien ships. "My God," whispered Lisa. "Look at the hull cameras."
Ow.
Jake looked at the external monitors and gasped. The Defiant's hull was changing. The metal was becoming smooth and organic, like the Kethver ships. Strange patterns of light flowed across the surface, and the ship itself seemed to be growing larger. "The alien weapons are not just attacking us," Karen said with growing excitement. "They are trying to convert us, to make us part of their collective. But our technology is resisting the change." The result was something neither human nor alien. The Defiant was becoming a hybrid, part machine and part living organism. Her weapons began to fire with new power, beams that could actually hurt the Kethver ships. Her shields became stronger, able to deflect the enemy attacks. "We are hurting them," reported Ryan with amazement. "Real damage this time. They cannot heal fast enough." The first time since the war began, a human ship was winning a fight against the Kethver. The Defiant danced through their formation, her new weapons carving through organic hulls like they were made of paper. Enemy ships began to retreat, their collective consciousness finally recognizing a real threat. "They are pulling back," observed Amy. "The entire fleet is withdrawing." Jake could hardly believe it. One ship had stopped an entire alien armada. But he knew this was just the beginning. The Kethver would return with new strategies, new weapons. The war was far from over. "Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Price," Amy reported. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, showing shock and hope in equal measure. "Jake, what did you do?" "Our sensors show the enemy fleet is retreating." "We learned something, Admiral," Jake replied. "The Kethver technology can be turned against them. We can fight these things." "Can you return to Earth? Our scientists need to study what happened to your ship." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted, but victorious. The Defiant herself was no longer purely human, but she was still their ship, still their home. "We are coming home, Admiral, and we are bringing the war with us." The message spread through human space faster than light itself. The Defiant had stood her ground. One ship and 800 people had faced impossible odds and won. It was the beginning of humanity's fight back. The first step toward victory. The galaxy would learn that when humans drew a line in space and said no further, they meant it. The Kethver had made their first mistake. They had underestimated the power of people who refused to give up. The line had held. Now it was time to push back.